Can you trust Amazon to build you a decent watch collection? Well, today we're going to find out. I bought an entire watch collection comprising solely of Amazon's Choice recommendations, the special picks that Amazon places at the top of the page with this label attached. Does this tag even mean anything? Are these watches actually any good? Well, I sure hope so, because last time I tried this sort of thing, it didn't exactly go to plan. Back in 2022, I looked at 2 Amazon's Choice pieces from Sterling Original, and they were some of the worst watches for the money that I've ever come across, with extremely crude construction, exaggerated MSRPs, and even a fake in-house movement that was actually a rebadged Chinese one. It was a miracle that they were ever recommended. You'd have been better off buying almost anything else on the site. I really hope Amazon's recommendation system has improved since then, because today I'm not just bringing you 1 or 2 watches, I've purchased 7. They're all linked in the video description if any of them end up being good, fingers crossed. I decided to get 1 watch for each of the 7 categories you can see on screen. In essence, it's a mini watch collection covering all bases. And to keep the contest fair for each of these, I opened an incognito tab to ensure my previous purchases didn't affect the results, typed the watch's style into the search bar, and then just bought the Amazon's Choice item, no questions asked. As for what Amazon's Choice actually means, well, according to Amazon, they're picked due to being highly rated, well priced, and available to ship immediately. They're also on average delivered faster and returned less frequently than alternative products. Amazon's Choice highlights products we think customers may like. Apparently brands can't pay to receive this award either, unless they get loads of fake reviews, I guess, and this badge seems to be called Overall Pick in other countries like the US. More on those later. So let's see what the boys, or bots, at Amazon have picked for my watch collection. Going in alphabetical order, we begin with a chronograph, introducing the Seconda Jensen, which cost me a mere $39.99. If you live outside of the UK, this one may not ring any bells, but here in the UK, Seconda has been a mainstay of high street shelves for a few decades now. Surprisingly founded by a Soviet company in 1966, they apparently no longer have any Russian ties, with all their watches instead being produced in Hong Kong since 1993. With such a history, you're probably wondering why you don't hear much about this brand on YouTube. Well, I always suspected it was because their watches sucked. Mainly because I always thought they looked cheap in shop windows. They've got that odd shininess to them. You know when it's a bit unsettling and it looks a bit too shiny? So I was quite excited to put that theory to the test. Sadly, this video isn't like the Star Wars sequels where I subvert your expectations over and over. Oh, I'm afraid, even for 40 quid, this one's a waste of money. The out-of-the-box feel is nothing short of horrendous. I mean, the packaging itself is actually quite pleasant, but the watch within makes my old Hot Wheels cars feel hefty in comparison. The bracelet is as jangly as a box of nails, and the whole package feels confusingly light considering the large size of the watch. At roughly 43mm across, you'd expect a fairly weighty feel. Alas, it's closer to a toy in the hands. Part of that is because the watch is actually constructed of brass, which is inferior to the industry standard 316L stainless steel used by most brands. True, you've got to be realistic and temper your expectations for budget products, and if you've purchased a Seconda in the past, you may even feel aggrieved that I'm calling them out for this. But if you think Seconda watches are good, you're going to be mind blown by what else is out there these days, especially at the budget end of the spectrum. Watches like this were left in the dust many moons ago when the Chinese manufacturers started selling directly to customers, offering far more value. More on those in a moment. As far as the rest of the Jensen goes, the case and bracelet don't match because one component is brass and the other is steel. While not hideous, the dial is just extremely basic, evident by the fact that everything is just so flat and hands each fall way short of their respective markers. The whole design looks very generic too, though this piece does have some limited upsides. It may be terribly built, but the bracelet at least offers a plethora of micro-adjustment holes, and the 50 meters of water resistance is pretty solid for a watch at this price. I don't think the bezel looks too bad either, even if it is a completely different tone to the dial. Oddly, it also has a domed mineral crystal on the top. I've noticed in recent years that more and more budget brands have started using this almost as a cheap parlor trick to try and make their terrible watches look more expensive. It's easy because these very lightly curved mineral crystals cost only a tad more than the flat ones and can add some flashiness, but more often than not, they simply ruin legibility by picking up a ton of room reflections, just like this one. In essence, it's a goodie bag watch, and I think your money is far better spent on other watches or simply nothing at all. Interestingly, the Amazon US pick is the much more capable Orient Mako Solar Chronograph. This is far superior in terms of looks, functionality, and construction, though it is considerably more expensive. If you want something closer to the price of this Seconda, I'd recommend instead looking at the likes of Casio or Loris, who make steel chronographs for just a little more money. You can even consider Chinese brands like Pagani Design and Addis Dive, which sell on either Amazon or AliExpress and completely embarrass this Seconda in terms of price to performance. If you're normally a high street watch buyer, I think you will be pretty shocked by the gulf in quality. I'll throw a couple of my personal picks in the video description. So what have we got next? Digitals. Now I expected this one to be a no-brainer. It's gotta be a cheap Casio, right? Somehow, no, Amazon's choice is the £8 Handposh watch. I'm not kidding, here it is, the Handposh. Well, supposedly that's what it is. The product description features many references to Biden watches, which filled me with dread after my previous review of that brand. Though the watch dial then says Len Chin on it, or Len Quinn. Handposh? Biden? Len Quinn? Who knows? Either way, the watch itself is surprisingly passable. For £8, any kind of functional watch would probably qualify as a success. But I have to say, this is much better than I expected. Now, there's no chance I'd take it over a Casio F91W, but it is surprisingly adept in certain ways. The digital display is massive and easily readable from above, which could be helpful if you've got poor eyesight. Though the viewing angles are an abomination. It's completely illegible just a few degrees off center, which isn't great. But I guess for this money, it's also not a complete deal breaker. The functions are intuitive and easy to use, just like a Casio, and the backlight is also better than some of those models, including the F91. Perhaps the biggest surprises are the case and strap. The silicone band is comfortable and has a ton of adjustment holes. While the case is much slimmer than I expected as well, it's still some form of plastic as you might expect, but the watch isn't nearly as clunky as I thought, considering the 43.7mm diameter. The case back is sealed with 4 screws like loads of other digitals, and Len Quinn, or whoever makes this, is also claiming a 580M water resistance rating to boot, though I wouldn't go pushing the limits of that if you can help it. On top is a piece of mineral crystal as well, which is more scratch resistant than the acrylic often used in this price range. And design-wise, I guess they're going for the whole faux sports watch or smartwatch thing, and I have to say, I don't think they've done that badly. Now, I think some of the Casio models are still a much better bet, with a much more proven track record, especially those with a good backlight or a mineral crystal. In the US, the F91W is Amazon's pick, unsurprisingly. However, this Handposh isn't as bad as it sounds, and I can see why some people may prefer this one, especially given its larger proportions. It also marks the first time I've seen mock quick-release spring bars. The rear of this band has nubs molded into it, simulating quick-release levers, but of course, they don't do anything. They're just pieces of silicon. A very bizarre thing to fabricate. Also, it's probably drop-shipped, so you may be able to get this one even cheaper under a different brand name elsewhere. Things take a more familiar turn when we head to dive watches. This one actually is a Casio, the MDV 106 to be precise. This fan favourite, also known as the Duro, has been the best value quartz dive watch for many years at this point. I'm surprised no one's dethroned it by now. It looks pretty good, it's got decent case finishing, a hefty feel, and very strong water resistance. It's got the basic specs you want in a watch, including steel housing and a mineral crystal, and these days, it's available in more colours than ever before, as well as extra versions under the MDV 107 designation, which is the same watch, just without the Marlin fish logo. If you're looking for a hardy dive watch for very little money, Amazon is bang on the money here, as the MDV 106 is a strong choice that you can rely on, so long as you can tank its wide 44mm sizing, that is. Interestingly, Amazon US strays from this pick, instead opting for the lesser-known MTPS 110. This solar dive watch is one I've also reviewed before, and it bears some resemblance to the Duro with a similar case and dial. While it has some functional advantages, it makes 2 sacrifices to achieve this: a fixed bezel and reduced water resistance. It's still good and maybe an option, but I personally prefer the Duro. In fact, I've got a full video comparing the two also down below as well for you. You'll also find a link to the Amazon's Choice dress watch, the Olev's N-G3613-HH. Now this watch is about as good as it sounds. Straight out of the gate, this looks much more like a sports watch than a dress watch to me, given it's basically an AP Royal Oak clone. But when I searched sports watch, Amazon just gave me a bunch of smartwatches, so I guess fitting it in this category will have to suffice. According to the box, this watch has been endorsed by Hollywood movie star and TV superstar Iko Uwais, so you just know it's going to be high quality. True to form, the Olev's is a borderline scam, with a trashy appearance made worse by the fact that they're clearly lying about materials. On the listing, the seller claims that the case and bracelet are both made of stainless steel, and while that may, and I emphasize may, be true for the bracelet, there's more chance my skull is made of stainless steel than this watch case. I mean, look at it. Not only does it not match the bracelet in the slightest, with them being a completely different tone that's actually even more evident to the naked eye, but the roughness of the brushing is a dead giveaway that this is not stainless steel, but instead an inferior metal that doesn't respond well at all to surface treatment. I guess it's most likely a zinc alloy, as it feels just like the old Spaghetti Scametti and Biden watches I previously featured on Ben's Watch Club. It doesn't look at all like PVD coated stainless steel, which feels much higher quality than this. My wife mistook the OLEDs for plastic at first, and I don't even blame her. It really does feel that shoddy. So yeah, who knows what the real specs are with this one, but at least the design is somewhat passable, as it's basically a copy of an already popular design. The dial is much plainer than the original AP, with a tacky diamante at the top center, and beneath it, the Rolex-inspired crown logo. It's also got that octagonal bezel, and in fact, that bezel is not aligned in the slightest. It's completely twisted. This thing, it just has no redeeming qualities whatsoever, and it's not even a surprise. You see, this exact model sells for under $10 a pop on Alibaba, meaning the Amazon seller is just flipping an existing watch for more than triple the retail price. Remember, Alibaba is making a profit on this at less than a tenner. That's how bad this watch really is. So bad, in fact, that I didn't even bother resizing it. I mean, what's the point? How this ever made it to Amazon's choice, I'll never know, as this is in the top 5 worst watches I've ever covered. In this situation, if you want a sports watch like this, just buy a Casio Edifice and be done with it. They may retail for slightly more, but boy, you'll be getting a significantly better watch in every perceivable way. If you really want a sporty clone watch like this and have a very tight budget, you should instead look at more widely known Chinese brands like Pagani Design, Adidas Dive, or Cadison, whose cheap watches actually use reasonable materials and cost more than $2 to make. You can buy them directly on AliExpress as well, saving you an arm and a leg. For this one, Amazon US picked out this substantially better Citizen dress watch. While it's not a model I'm familiar with and seems to be one of Citizen's most basic offerings, there's a 99.9% chance it still puts this OLEVs to shame. I'd still probably go for some other options, which I'll also link below. This could be one big description this time. Thankfully, things improved substantially when looking at field watches. For this one, Amazon selected the Loris RJ655AX9, a phenomenal budget choice that's just under £50 still. Unlike the last one, this piece actually has a blasted steel case, as well as big water resistance and a reasonable strap, all packed into its compact 36mm housing. This Loris even comes with a secret feature. When the lights go out, the dial comes alive with a bright, radiating green display thanks to the LumiBrite surface paint. It's really fantastic and solidifies this as a truly capable field watch for those on a budget. It's a great watch and it just happens to be cheap basically. While it's not the fanciest and only uses a simple quartz movement, this little Loris is easily the most well-rounded field watch in its price range, together with its titanium-cased sibling, with alternatives from the likes of Timex falling short in materials and proportions. And the good Timex watches just tend to cost a little bit more. This piece suits being small as well, not to mention it's extremely thin, reducing the chances of impact, just as a field watch should. Loris watches are harder to get in the US for whatever reason, so over there you're kind of stuck with the similarly priced, albeit lesser performing Timex Expedition Scout, which is okay but lacks the highlights of the Loris. Notably, the case is only brass, which is a bummer, though it does have an Indiglo nightlight, which is a good substitute. I had zero clue what pilot watch Amazon would select going into this. There isn't really a staple model at the lower end of the market, which, as you've probably worked out, is where Amazon's choice products tend to be. What I ended up with was, oh god, what on earth is this case? That's what I asked myself immediately upon unboxing this one. I hope they're deliberately going for that pre-aged look, because that's certainly what you're getting with this model. It's the Miltech World War II Black Vintage Pilot Watch. Before making this video, I'd never heard of Miltech, but apparently they're a brand of the German Sturm wholesale company, which I've also never heard of. While they may be German, and while the watch looks just like an old Wehrmacht Flieger design, the watch doesn't say made in Germany anywhere, so I'm assuming this is still manufactured in China, especially for a price of just over 40 quid. Despite this, it really does look like something from World War II, predominantly because of that very peculiar case finish. It has a tumbled or mottled look, exacerbated by the fact that the majority of the housing is made of brass, which tends to show its age quicker than stainless steel. Now, I've reviewed brass case watches before, but this is the first time I've seen one with such an extreme finish. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either, as it does look quite convincing. As for how it will age over the long term, I'm not entirely sure. Most low-end brass watches have a chromed surface to mimic stainless steel, which can chip and scratch easily, whereas this one doesn't have that. I'd hazard a guess that this Miltech, with its more raw, natural approach, may hold up better over time, given it already looks battered straight out of the box. It also matches the military theming, which helps. Would I take this over a steel watch? No. But would I take this over a glossy brass watch? Probably, yeah. The rear of this Miltech appears to be steel, but sadly, water may still prove troublesome, as this watch's 30-meter water resistance rating is the lowest designation commonly found in watches, usually indicating only light splash resistance. That said, Miltech is known for creating a range of other military gear, so perhaps their testing procedures are more rigorous than those of other brands, maybe their ratings can be better trusted. The strap features a buckle echoing the same tumbled metal, though the strap is only made of rudimentary leather, presented at a belt-like level of thickness. It may work for combat usage, but I'm sure this will look raggy rather quickly. Atop the watch is this massively domed mineral crystal, reminiscent of many vintage pilot watches. It also has the same sort of profile, with a commanding 43mm diameter and 14.8mm overall thickness, which is pretty meaty for a battery-powered quartz watch. I've read that these domed crystals were originally used, at least in such huge sizes, to aid legibility in extreme conditions, and they enable bigger numerals and hands due to the magnification effect. Though I can't say that legibility is a particular strength here, despite the high contrast design, as there are just that many reflections throughout the crystal. There are a few reasons why many old-school military watches originally used acrylic, and this is one of them. It is much clearer. The dial here also seems to have some sort of subtle pattern, but it's hard to make out and, honestly, just makes it look dirty. It doesn't quite come across on camera the same, not sure what they were thinking there. Oh, and the lume is pretty sucky too. Overall though, I don't think this is nearly as bad as the likes of the Seconda or Olevs. I wouldn't buy it, I don't really like pilot's watches, but this Miltech does have some redeeming features and gimmicks that give it more of a unique character. I'm not sure why it's Amazon's choice, but you could do worse. I'd be more inclined to try something from AliExpress or perhaps even the Amazon US pick, which is this Casio Edifice alternative. It's much more cluttered, sure, but it is higher quality. And then I tried to order a sports watch. What I was aiming for was some type of integrated bracelet sports watch, something sexy and versatile. But rules are rules, and I ended up with this instead. I really should have known better. Meet the Vudso men's waterproof smartwatch. Number one, there isn't much smart about this watch, it's just a digital watch. And number two, this is different from what I ordered. The watch in the product shot says Skmei at the top, which is a somewhat well-known Chinese brand that makes Casio copies. The unit I received instead has a Vudso logo. Whether this means Skmei is secretly making these and this seller is just dropshipping with customized branding, I really don't know. What I do know is that their branding is nonetheless disastrous. Who comes up with this stuff, seriously? Vudso? Is that the best you could do? Oh, there's a third difference too. The main product photo infers that this is a negative or inverted display, when in reality, the watch looks like this. It's just a standard digital watch, and you only get the black and green effect when activating the backlight, which is quite misleading. I have to say though, this backlight is menacing. It's probably the brightest I've ever seen, all inside a watch that cost me just 12 quid. Was it £12 well spent? No, I wouldn't go that far, but the backlight does put many Casio backlights to shame. On that note, I'm sure there's a high chance this watch is a copy of a specific Casio model. It's just that there are thousands of Casio digitals, past and present, so I'd struggle to tell you exactly which one it is. But based on Skmei's track record, I'd be surprised if this wasn't a clone of something. Oh, by the way, the weird flare you can see at the bottom center isn't actually visible to the human eye. It's like a scene from a horror movie where the monster only appears through a camera lens or something. In some ways, this is the polar opposite of the hand posh I mentioned earlier. It's chunky and bulbous, akin to many G-Shock watches. It even has the same integrated strap retainer to hold the strap in a fixed position. It's got the run-of-the-mill stopwatch and alarm, though this one also has an unusual domed crystal, which I can't see the use for on a very basic digital watch like this. I assume, like I mentioned earlier, it's one of these cheap attempts to make it look fancier. While slightly more expensive, Casio watches are far more proven, so I'm unsure why you wouldn't just go for the real thing. In fact, I'd probably even take a used Casio over this. Still, for £12, it's a functional digital watch with better viewing angles than the hand posh. I can see it tanking a good few bumps and scrapes, but it's not much of a looker, is it? Amazon US again recommended the F91W, which isn't really what I was after either. So here's an overview of the Amazon's Choice watch collection side by side. Would you buy any of the watches in this collection? Let me know in the comments below, and for some slightly better suggestions, check out the video on screen now where I cover the best watches of 2024. There are even some fantastic low-cost options in there too that blow a lot of these away.